Tonight's headlines: the war in Iraq, the bill comes due. What will it cost you, and what effect will it have on the U.S. economy? Also tonight, are you or your kids downloading music illegally? The recording industry may have a surprise for you. CBS News exposes still more holes in airport security as we begin a special series, Protecting America Undercover. And 343 firefighters died heroes on 9/11. Today, nearly 2 years later, the final funeral.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. $87 billion minimum. That is what President Bush is asking Americans to spend for the war on terror, mostly in Iraq, but also in Afghanistan and around the world. $87 billion. That's $300 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. And that is just for the coming year. And it's on top of the $79 billion Congress approved less than 6 months ago. The president revealed his new price tag in a television address last night, and John Roberts reports the reaction, pro and con, is still coming in.
The collective gasp of sticker shock echoed from Baghdad to the halls of Congress today as lawmakers learned the cost to occupy and rebuild Iraq will far outstrip the cost of the war.
I will soon submit to Congress a request for $87 billion.
In just 4 months, mission accomplished has become mission critical. The extra spending needed to set Iraq right will send the deficit soaring from a projected $475 billion next year to well over $500 billion. And that could jeopardize the president's other spending priorities.
The notion that we could afford tax cuts of that magnitude for the wealthiest people in the country, and these ongoing costs in Iraq, and a Medicare prescription drug benefit all at the same time, we can't afford all of that.
Democrats are already talking about rolling back tax cuts to pay the bills. The White House insists the deficit is manageable. That may be true, critics say, but only for a while.
It's not like the tornado that takes your house down. It's like termites. They slowly eat away at the foundation, but over time, they do a lot of damage.
In casting Iraq as the central front in the war on terror, by inference tying it to September 11th, President Bush sought to blunt criticism for the money, time, and sacrifice an open-ended occupation will require. That brought charges from a leading Democratic presidential candidate today that Mr. Bush is manipulating fears of terrorism.
7 out of 10 people in this country believe that Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. That simply is flat out untrue.
While no link has ever been established between Iraq and 9/11, the White House today dismissed the charges of manipulation as nothing more than politics. But there is no question that with the president's poll numbers dropping as his problems abroad and at home mount, he needs some kind of rallying point to regain the momentum. Dan?
John Roberts at the White House, thanks. Now back to that $87 billion and who's going to pay it. You and I and we. CBS's Cynthia Bowers reports that with the economy struggling and money tight in many homes, it raises difficult questions about hard choices.
When Sean Chisamore heard the president promised $87 billion to fight terror overseas, he was taken aback. In his house, $87 is hard to come by.
That seems like a real large amount. That could be spent here. Definitely could be spent here.
Like millions of other American families, the Chisamores are struggling to make ends meet. Sean was one of 5,000 people laid off when Motorola shut down its cell phone operations here in northern Illinois last April. Now wife Shelley is the primary breadwinner, working at the local high school cafeteria.
The money could be spent here, just like on all the kids that are starving. Working in a school system, I see that every day.
Just a few miles down the highway at Nick's Cozy Nook, some of the lunchtime diners were skeptical about the president's plans.
I hope they got it all figured out how they're going to come up with all this extra money.
I think it's probably an endless bucket over there to be filled. You know, a bucket with holes in it that you keep pouring water in, and how much do you pour? When do you stop?
Even though times are tough for a lot of people around here, this is a part of the country where support has run high for the administration, and most seem to back in principle what the president proposed last night.
It's a war against terrorism. Right now, it's an investment in Iraq.
I thought it was the right thing, and I think it should have been finished like 10 years ago. It would have been a lot cheaper, and you would have saved a lot of lives.
But Sean Chisamore worries if the economy doesn't turn around soon, the Warriors may not have much to come home to.
My wife's brother, he's in the reserves. You know, when he comes back, what's going to be like for him when he comes back?
It's a dilemma many Americans seem to be wrestling with, torn between patriotism and the price they're being asked to pay. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Harvard, Illinois.
In Iraq today, the U.S. military said that for the 7th day in a row, no Americans were killed in combat, though 2 soldiers were wounded in a bomb attack. Unfairly, according to the White House, most of the news coming out of Iraq these days has been about the problems of post-war occupation. The White House has spent weeks fighting off growing calls to fix blame on the architect of the war, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, who arrived back in Washington this evening after a trip to Iraq and Afghanistan visiting U.S. troops. But in his whirlwind trip to Iraq, Rumsfeld himself was playing leader and optimistic salesman for all that's been going right. Points he made when we sat down to talk as the weekend began in Baghdad.
I'm impressed with the accomplishment that's taken place. The 23 million Iraqi people are free. City councils are sprouting up all across this country. A governing council's been formed. A cabinet's been important. Ministers have been appointed.
You're not worried about it?
Oh, of course one has to worry, because life isn't perfect. Life's tough, and this is a difficult situation.
A difficult situation not made easier, Rumsfeld says, by politicians, some running for president, who want the U.S. out of Iraq.
And getting the United Nations fully involved so we de-Americanize our presence in Iraq.
Rumsfeld told reporters today in Afghanistan that such statements could give America's enemies reason to continue their attacks.
Terrorists studied Somalia and persuaded themselves that they could, in fact, cause us to acquiesce in whatever it is they wanted to do. The United States is not going to do that. President Bush is not going to do that.
While he has been accentuating the positive and spinning the good, Rumsfeld did concede that Iraq's security situation is critical. One solution, getting more Iraqis to police their own country.
We've gone from 0 5 months ago to 55,000 Iraqis who are engaged either in the army or in the police or in border patrols. It's an amazing accomplishment. Now, is that enough? No, it's going to have to continue to go up.
Rumsfeld's critics are not just Democratic presidential candidates. Some powerful Republicans have joined in. But various sources tell CBS News most such Republicans are in Congress, not in the administration. And we're told Rumsfeld is still safe with the president, who after all is the ultimate commander. But with Iraq still dangerous and unstable, the clock is ticking for all with responsibility for making Iraq work. Well, the clock is also ticking on next year's presidential campaign. Justices of the U.S. Supreme Court held a rare summer sessions today on the merits of the new campaign finance law. CBS News correspondent Jim Stewart reports on today's arguments and what's at stake.
On his way to argue a case that will likely shape American politics for years to come, former Special Prosecutor Ken Starr was absolutely right about at least one thing today.
Oh, they'll have lots of questions, I think.
That was an understatement. Starr and his opponent, Solicitor General Ted Olson, barely opened their mouths before the justices pounced.
You have to put money in the turnstiles.
Too much money. Too much money. That's the problem. Too much money is being spent on elections.
They fired off nonstop questions about a law that would fundamentally change how campaigns are funded. While their questions don't always reflect their decisions, the judges seem to accept the notion that the river of money flowing into political campaigns needs to be better regulated. The question is whether this law, which took 6 years of wrangling to pass, is the best way to do that. Passed last year, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act would ban so-called soft money, which are unregulated contributions chiefly from corporations and labor unions. In 2002 alone, more than $496 million in soft money was collected. It would also penalize users of attack ads and ban smokescreen ads like this one.
But the Daschle Democrats say yes to Ron Kirk for U.S. Senate, and that's bad for Texas. Call Ron.
Ads that don't endorse any candidate but run close to an election. And even if they uphold the law, some justices worried people will just find a way around it.
We do it with the tax code all the time. We don't say, oh, it's an abuse. He took advantage of and there will be abuses under this law, too.
A decision is expected well before the 2004 elections kick off, but it's not like the candidates are idle. The 9 Democratic presidential hopefuls have raked in $61 million thus far, while President Bush has $35 million and counting. Jim Stewart, CBS News at the Supreme Court.
The hurricane season is getting busier all over the Atlantic Ocean map. Of the 4 tropical systems now swirling at sea, forecasters are most concerned about Isabel, a dangerous Category 3 hurricane that could threaten Caribbean islands by the weekend. Too soon to say if Isabel will be a threat to the U.S. mainland. Fabian, which was a huge Category 3, trashed tiny Bermuda this past weekend, killing at least 4 people and causing widespread damage. Coming up, we begin a CBS Evening News investigative series, Protecting America. Tonight, undercover at America's airports. Loads of security in passenger terminals, but who's guarding the back door?
The CBS Evening News and tonight's Eye on America segment are sponsored by new Preparation H Cooling Gel with vitamin E and aloe.
We're coming up this week on the 2nd anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Tonight, the CBS Evening News begins a week-long investigative series, Protecting America. The government has spent billions of dollars and created a huge new Department of Homeland Security. But how much safer from terrorism are we today? CBS's Vince Gonzalez went undercover to examine U.S. airports and found that while security is tight in the terminals, there's little to stop anyone from taking the back way in.
Travelers see the barbed wire,
You must take your laptop computers out.
gates, and guards. But workers at the nation's airports say the public is being lulled into a false sense of security. No one is watching the perimeter at most airports.
There's opportunity for a terrorism attack.
Diana Rushing represents flight attendants at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. They're upset by this employee gate. After showing an ID, workers, some of whom it recently turned out were illegal aliens, get no screening.
So besides the ID check, when they just roll right on through, there's no other layer of security in there?
No.
No screening, no wanding?
No.
Federal law requires perimeter security be as tough as terminal security. There should be screening or inspection of all individuals, vehicles, and other equipment before entry into a secured area of an airport. Thank you. But we were able to drive through that gate saying we were lost.
We're in. We're in, and if we wanted to, he's not even looking back, we could go right into the airport. And there are the planes.
We did leave, but not far away. Heavy trucks barreled through this unguarded construction gate and into an area very close to runways. At Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, close to 1,000 construction workers enter every day unscreened. Their coolers and toolboxes are not searched. We entered supposedly secure areas where potential threats, including propane tanks and fuel trucks, were left unguarded.
Right now we're in an area that's supposed to be secure. No one is supposed to be able to get at equipment like this, and yet if we wanted to, if we had the tools, we could probably steal this truck and take it anywhere inside the airport, even very close to the flight line.
Gates were also open and unguarded at a construction site very close to runways. DFW says workers are screened before entering high security areas, but construction sites inside the airport have different rules.
The regulations regarding our perimeter are totally and distinct differences from a regulatory point of view than anything to do with the construction site.
At Chicago's O'Hare, officials say they believe the airport is in compliance with all federal security regulations, and they are doing everything to meet those standards. But the Association of Flight Attendants says only San Francisco and Denver have fixed perimeter security.
As far as we know, every other airport in the country is just as wide open as it was before September 11th, 2001.
According to federal documents, flight crews have been warning the government for years. One pilot wrote of airport perimeters, "There is no security." Another said, "Airport security is a joke." In Dallas, I'm Vince Gonzalez for Eye on America.
Tomorrow in Protecting America, Our vulnerable cities, from crowded harbors and waterways to busy border crossings, how a lack of money and manpower hampers anti-terror efforts. In the Middle East today, the man Yasser Arafat chose as the new Palestinian prime minister refused to say whether he'll take the job. Ahmed Kourei is Speaker of the Palestinian Parliament and an Arafat ally, unlike the former, now resigned prime minister who quit on Saturday. U.S. officials are cautious about Kourei, saying they want to see if he promotes peace with Israel. Just ahead on the CBS Evening News, rough waves for music pirates. The recording industry starts suing individuals who steal music off the internet. If you or your children are among millions of Americans stealing music off the internet, the recording industry could be about to rock your world. As CBS's Sandra Hughes reports, the industry today took new steps to give some of these individuals a record, a conviction record in court.
All right, so this is You Never Know off Dave Matthews Band Busted Stuff CD.
At the University of Southern California, the latest move by the recording industry to stop online song swapping struck a sour note.
I don't think it's really going to deter people. It might scare people for a while and make people more cautious, but I don't think that it'll make people stop doing it.
But the biggest music makers say it has to stop, and today file lawsuits against more than 250 people who put their music files on the internet via networks like Kazaa.
What this is about is deterrence. We are attempting to let people know that there can be consequences when you engage in illegal activity.
It may seem drastic, but it's economic survival. The industry blames free downloads for a 31% drop in CD sales in the past 3 years, and for the bankruptcy of the huge music chain Warehouse Records. And to be fair, it has been warning people on TV.
Illegally downloading music is the same thing as going into a CD store and a CD.
Even at university orientations.
The music industry is monitoring people, and if they catch you, we have to comply and we will shut down your connection.
Musicians have been screaming about it for years.
If I let a car mechanic download my music for free, then I want him to come over and fix my car for free.
Back at the USC radio station, the DJ is checking to make sure he's not on the subpoena list. That's because the only way to protect yourself from the promised legal action is to take advantage of the industry's offer of amnesty. That means come clean, delete your files, and promise to never, ever do it again. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Los Angeles.
In Erie, Pennsylvania, a development today in the baffling case of Brian Wells, the pizza man killed by a collar bomb last month after he robbed a bank. The FBI today sought the public's help in identifying the two men in these sketches who agents say may have some connection to the case. Wells insisted someone else locked the bomb on him to force him to rob the bank. The governor of Indiana underwent several hours of emergency surgery today for a brain hemorrhage. Frank O'Bannon, who had collapsed in his hotel room in Chicago. His prognosis is uncertain. Doctors say the next 24 to 48 hours will be critical. O'Bannon, a Democrat, is serving his second term as Indiana governor. He is 73 years old. Coming up next year on the CBS Evening News, why this funeral closes a chapter in the tragedy of September 11th. Now, here are some of the stories we're working on for later this week. How secure is the U.S. 2 years after 9/11? We continue a special CBS investigation, some of it undercover, protecting America. On Thursday, the anniversary of 9/11, the story of a man who lost his wife that day, but found a new cause and now new love. And a Friday consumer alert about con men disguised as men of the cloth. It has been some time since we ended a broadcast the way we will end it tonight. It is also the last time we will end it this way, with the funeral of a firefighter killed at the World Trade Center, September 11th, 2001. CBS's Jim Axelrod reports on the final funeral.
Again, the firefighters came and stood out in the street, in front of a flag and a flower car and a church. Again, Mayor Bloomberg and former Mayor Giuliani took their places while the pipers played, and a fallen brother was remembered.
Mike was the go-to guy. Mike was the guy that did the things that
he was always there for you.
Only this time was the last time. Michael Ragusa's is the final of 343 funerals for New York City firefighters killed on 9/11. His remains were never recovered. A vial of blood he'd once given a bone marrow clinic was all there was to bury.
For a parent, there is no greater pain than having to bury a child.
This funeral is not just a moving and poignant end. It marks a beginning of sorts as well. The start of the city's days of reflection and remembrance as the second anniversary of 9/11 approaches. This will be a solemn week in New York, a city working so hard to move forward, transported back.
We should never ever forget what he did. We should never ever forget what all of these men and women did on September 11, 2001, because they saved our country.
Because even though there may be no more firefighters' funerals, there is pain and grief and heartbreak that will never be fully buried. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
Lest we forget. And that's part of our world tonight. Dan Rather reporting from New York. We invite you to join us again tomorrow for the CBS Evening News. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, log on to cbsnews.com.
This is CBS.